That's gotta be Kane! Look at him! Look at the Undertaker standing in front of that giant who stands before him! Is that his younger brother? That's gotta be Kane! And with those iconic words, a legend was officially born. Hello, everyone. This is Warhawk Beyond 2040, bringing to you another edition of the Wrestling Discussion Series. And October 5th, 1987 marks 28 years ago that history was made when Kane made his WWF debut at In Your House, Bad Blood, and interfered in the first ever Hell in a Cell match between The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels, and ripped off the cell door off its hinges and delivered a tombstone to The Undertaker, thus kicking off one of the most epic rivalries of all time and allowing Shawn Michaels to pick up the victory. And for today's special edition, I am going to be discussing the success and failures of Kane's first year from October 1997 to December 1998. So, when I get asked about what is the greatest debut in wrestling history, some of the greatest debuts come to mind are The Undertaker, Kurt Angle, Brock Lesnar, to name a few. But if I had to choose one that really stood out to me, made a huge impact, and still gets talked about a lot to this day, and that is, without question, Kane's WWF debut at In Your House, Bad Blood. Now, the way they introduced Kane was excellent. The build up, the storytelling, the payoff, everything about Kane's debut was top notch storytelling. Now, Kane was first hinted at in the early parts of 1997. So, after The Undertaker defeated Mankind at In Your House Revenge of the Taker, Undertaker burned Paul Bearer's face, and this kept Paul Bearer off TV for quite some time. And Paul Bearer made his return with his face covered in bandages and promised that he would reveal a dark secret about The Undertaker that was so bad and so horrific it would cause all of his loyal creatures of the night to turn on him forever. So, around this time, Paul Bearer was pretty much blackmailing The Undertaker into taking him back as his manager. And if he didn't, he would reveal his dark secret to the entire world. So The Undertaker reluctantly took Paul Bearer back as his manager, but this air quotes reunion would be very short lived as The Undertaker refused to take orders from Paul Bearer and eventually turned on him. And this resulted in Paul Bearer announcing that he was going to tell the entire world his dark secret, and he made his casket, and he's going to have to lay in it. So, Paul Bearer, in one of the best promos you will ever see, did an interview with Vince McMahon in the ring and told the story about two young boys. One was The Undertaker, and the other was his younger brother, Kane. So, one night, as Paul Bearer explained all of the details, The Undertaker set the funeral home on fire, and this resulted in Undertaker's parents getting killed and apparently killing Kane. But Paul Bearer revealed that Undertaker's brother Kane was alive and well, and he was coming for revenge against The Undertaker. And now, throughout the next few months, Paul Bearer would drop little hints here and there that Kane is coming, Undertaker. He's coming for you. He's been waiting 20 years to get his revenge. You're going to pay, Undertaker. You're going to burn in hell. So, all throughout this build up, Paul Bearer was really putting over this eventual dark arrival of The Undertaker's younger brother, Kane. And we would get little hints like dark red lights, all sorts of things, fire. Kane was coming for The Undertaker, but the question was, when was he coming? Now, around this time, The Undertaker was feuding with Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, and Paul Bearer would constantly pop up every so often to remind The Undertaker that Kane was coming. But of course, Undertaker didn't really take much notice of Paul Bearer. He was still dealing with Shawn Michaels and later on his teammates in the now newly formed D-Generation X faction. So around the second half of 1997, Paul Bearer was mostly absent, while The Undertaker was still continuing his feud with Shawn Michaels and DX. So the first ever Hell in a Cell match was announced between The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels at In Your House Bad Blood, with the stipulation that the winner would become the number one contender and face Bret Hart at Survivor Series 97. So, all throughout the Hell in a Cell match, The Undertaker physically dominated Shawn Michaels and busted him wide open and even kicked him off the top of the cell, resulting in HBK crashing through the announce table. And just when it looked like The Undertaker was going to finish Shawn Michaels for good, the unthinkable happened. The lights went out, this dreary, evil organ started playing, and then there was dark red lights, an explosion went off. We would see Paul Bearer coming out, and right in front of him was this massive monster of a man, all clad in red and black attire, with a dark red and black mask with long hair, and it looked like it was The Undertaker's brother Kane. And Vince McMahon delivered one of the greatest calls in the history of wrestling. That's got to be Kane. That's got to be The Undertaker's younger brother. And Kane came in aggressively, ripped off the cell door off its hinges, stared down The Undertaker, and The Undertaker, for the first time ever, looked on in pure disbelief. And Kane would raise the lights with his pyro, deliver the tombstone to The Undertaker, allowing Shawn Michaels to pick up the victory, and Kane would silently walk out of the cell to a massive chorus of boos. What an unbelievable debut. You couldn't ask for a much better and more bigger impact than Kane making his debut in the WWF. And what better way to get heat by taking out The Undertaker? And I've said this before, if you want to get heat, if you want to be hated as a heel, there's no person better to get heat than by attacking The Undertaker, because by 1997, The Undertaker was so loved and so over. You even so much as step on The Undertaker's foot, you were hated. And Kane was off to an amazing start. And the next night on Raw, Paul Bearer officially introduced Kane to the entire world, and he put the challenge out there to The Undertaker. We're going to go through every single wrestler on the roster until we get to you, Undertaker, and you're going to have to fight your younger brother. And for the next few weeks, Kane would go on a massive rampage, taking out various wrestlers, interfering in matches. It was unbelievable. And The cool thing about Kane as a character, he never said a word. He didn't even speak. His actions spoke louder than his words. Kane would just come out, destroy everything and everyone in front of him, and leave. And Kane, in those early months, was like something out of a horror movie. Imagine if Jason from Friday the 13th and Michael Myers from Halloween fused together. You would probably get something like Kane. And he was so unique. And, whereas The Undertaker, he was like that unstoppable undead monster. Kane was pretty much like that, but I would say a lot more violent. Undertaker was a lot more spooky, a lot more creepier, and more like Frankenstein, like from them old Hammer horror movies of the 1930s. Kane was like that, but taken to the next level. He was such a violent individual. No one wanted to face Kane. Nobody wanted any part of him whatsoever. And his mask, everything about him, his whole presentation, the mystique, it was 10 out of 10. And Kane was such a evil but intriguing wrestling heel. And the thing about Kane as a heel, he's not a heel like, for example, Shawn Michaels or even like Bret Hart at the time. Kane was just an out of control monster. He went after heels and faces. It didn't really matter who you were, whether you were the good guy or the bad guy. Kane was going to take you out no matter what. And the whole thing with good and evil not registering, the only other villain I can think of who didn't really care about who you were and just would take you out no matter what was Doomsday from the Superman comics. This big, hulking monster, didn't say a word, just came in and caused destruction and mayhem. That was what Kane was like. He was like a cross between Jason, Michael Myers, and Doomsday from the Superman comics. My goodness. So Kane would have his first official match at Survivor Series 97 against Mankind. And Mankind was the first real person who really stood up to Kane. And they had a really good, entertaining match. Most of the match was in dark red lights, which I thought was a very unique thing because a lot of Kane's early matches on TV, he always wrestled in the dark lights, and I thought that was a nice touch to his character. And Mankind did put up a fight, but unfortunately, Kane was just too much for anyone, and he absolutely annihilated Mankind. And the cool thing about Kane and Mankind, they would have a very unique bond with each other, as they would go from being the fiercest of enemies to demonic tag partners to being enemies again. So it's quite a unique bond that Kane and Mankind had together. Both masked madmen who were just drawn to each other and both loved dishing out punishment. Kane loves to dish punishment, Mankind loves to receive punishment. So it was a very strange and weird bond that these two had. And all the while, The Undertaker was absent throughout all of Kane's destruction, and he would openly say, I would never fight my brother Kane. So all the while, Kane was causing all of this destruction, and Undertaker and Kane would eventually come face to face. Undertaker would refuse to fight his brother, even when Kane slapped him across the face, but it never happened. So as we move towards 1988, it seemed like The Undertaker and Kane had reconciled their differences and were now on the same page. And it looked like Kane was going to help The Undertaker defeat Shawn Michaels for the WWF title at the Royal Rumble 1988 pay per view. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. Kane turned on his brother, The Undertaker, allowing Shawn Michaels to pick up the victory, and he would lock The Undertaker in his own casket, pour loads of gasoline all over it, and set it on fire, thus getting his revenge on his older brother. So, with The Undertaker gone, Kane would begin his first real major feud against Vader, and he performed horrific actions against Vader. He would attack him with a screwdriver, a wrench, and showed unbelievable strength in lifting up Vader for a tombstone. And not only was Kane incredibly violent and evil and aggressive, but he was unbelievably strong. There just seemed like there was no one Kane couldn't lift up. He would pick up anybody, regardless of their size, for a tombstone. And the physique of Kane, he was like etched out of stone or granite. He was just so big, so muscular, and he just looked like something out of a comic book. He was just so massive as an individual. So Kane and Vader would have a match at In Your House, No Way Out of Texas. Kane would pick up the victory and continue to destroy Vader. And then this would eventually lead to his first ever match against The Undertaker at WrestleMania 14, when The Undertaker finally made his return and reluctantly agreed to fight his brother Kane and laid down the challenge for WrestleMania 14. And Kane delivered one of his greatest performances of his entire career. He absolutely dominated The Undertaker and physically owned him. Yes, The Undertaker did hold his own, but Kane proved that night, even though he didn't win, he still left a lasting impression and showed that victories and losses didn't matter to Kane. All he cared about was getting the last word and physically hurting his opponents. And that's exactly what he did to The Undertaker. And it took 3 tombstones to keep the Kane down. Unbelievable. I still remember me and my best friend we were watching WrestleMania 14 on VHS, and Undertaker picked up Kane for the tombstone, and we just thought, okay, that's it, it's all over. Undertaker's got this. 1, 2, Kane kicked out. My God. Okay, it will take 2. So Undertaker went for another tombstone, and me and my best friend thought, okay, there's no way Kane can kick out of 2. It's impossible. And Kane kicked out again. And my best friend, with that look on his face, looked at me and said, "Oh my God, this guy isn't normal. How can he kick out of 2 tombstones?" And I said, "It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy." And then you could see Undertaker just looked absolutely out of gas. And he finally barely got Kane up for the 3rd tombstone, and he finally got him down. But notice that even though Undertaker got the 1, 2, 3 victory, you could still see Kane moving. So even though he was kept down for 3 after 3 tombstones, Kane was still moving, proving that you could keep me down, but I'm still alive. Holy cow. And Kane would get the last word. He would destroy The Undertaker after the match, deliver the tombstone to the chair, and walk out with Paul Bearer. My God, what a freak. So then Undertaker and Kane had another match. They had the first ever Inferno match at In Your House Unforgiven. Kane would lose that match after Undertaker set Kane's arm on fire, but Kane was still a dominating presence. Now, by this point, you know, Kane didn't really win a lot of matches. He won his first match at Survivor Series 97 against Mankind, and he won his second match at In Your House No Way Out of Texas against Vader. But the next couple of matches, he lost. Now, that didn't do anything to hurt Kane, but I still think maybe Kane in his first year should have won maybe a few more matches. But because he was such a unique character and he wasn't really about wins and losses, it didn't really matter too much. But it would have been nice if Kane got maybe a couple of more wins on pay per view. So then the Undertaker and Kane feud would go on a little break. Kane would face Vader again at the Over the Edge pay per view in a mask versus mask match, with the loser forced to unmask. And Kane, of course, won that match and absolutely destroyed Vader and ripped off his mask. And I believe that was Vader's last match. Don't think I remember Vader appearing anymore after that. So Kane would get his first ever victory over The Undertaker and became the number one contender and faced Stone Cold Steve Austin for the WWF title at the King of the Ring pay per view in a first blood match with a very unique stipulation. If Kane was unable to win the WWF title, he would set himself on fire. And this would be around the time Kane would slowly start to speak. He would talk in this device which made him sound like a machine, really scary. And all throughout most of Kane's first year, he didn't even say a word. But to actually hear Kane speak and it sounded like a robot, like this evil machine, was downright scary and really added more to the mystique of the Kane character. If I do not win the title, I will set myself on fire. Scary, scary stuff. And then later on the show, he covered Stone Cold in blood after bringing down this red liquid from the ceiling, and Kane would deliver another evil threat with the dark red lights. And for me, this line was just downright scary. Austin, this Sunday the blood on you will be for real. Oh boy, scary, scary stuff. But I like what they did here. They didn't have Kane speak too much. And I think the less Kane said, the better it worked for him in the long run. And when he did speak, much like The Undertaker, you had to pay attention. You had to really listen. And by this point, although Kane was an evil heel, he was loved. He was over. You watch some of his entrances during 1988 when the lights went out and Kane came out. Fans popped like mad for this guy. And I've always said that if you can get the fans to cheer for you as a heel, as far as I'm concerned, you've made it. You've done something right. Because the fans were cheering for Kane because he was such a cool and unique character, and the good stuff he was doing the fans just latched onto him. Even though Kane was still very much an evil heel, the fans just couldn't get enough of him. So it was inevitable that at some point down the line, Kane would eventually become a babyface or at least a tweener, because no matter what evil act Kane was performing, the fans just absolutely adored this guy and they really embraced him. And Kane had not been in the WWF for a year yet, and 6 to 8 months already. This guy is over. He's mixing it up with the main event guys. You know, he's mixing it up with The Undertaker, Stone Cold. He's had run ins with DX. You know, this guy really showed that regardless of how long he's been there, he deserved and really looked like he belonged in the main event scene with the top guys because he earned it. He really did. And Kane, with a huge assist from The Undertaker, was able to defeat Stone Cold Steve Austin for the WWF title. So now, months after his debut in October, Kane was now on top of the world as the WWF champion. Who could possibly get that title of the Big Red Machine? Unfortunately, this title reign would be very short as Kane would drop the WWF title back to Stone Cold Steve Austin 24 hours later. This is where a big failure comes into it through no fault of Kane's. I get that Stone Cold was red hot and, you know, putting the title back on him really helped with the ratings, but I feel Kane deserved a longer title reign. Maybe he could have dropped it back to Austin at Fully Loaded, perhaps. At least give Kane a month title reign or something like that, because it just seemed like a bit of a waste for someone to come in so strong like Kane, finally get the title, and then just drop it the next night. I think maybe they could have kept it on Kane for a little bit longer and he could have dropped it at the next pay per view because that probably could have made things a bit more special. Maybe Vince McMahon sets up a series of matches. Maybe he has to go through DX or the Nation or something like that. You know, win a series of matches to get to Kane because I don't know really. I think Kane really, if it was up to me, he could have held that title even longer and just got on maybe a real tear. Maybe he could have held the title for 3 months or something. I don't know, but I have to question the booking around that because someone like Kane dropping the title the next night just looks a bit bad, really. I know Undertaker in '91 kept the title, I believe, for 6 days, and then he dropped it back to Hulk Hogan. Okay, 6 days ain't great either, but it's still better than dropping it to the guy you beat the night after you won it. But look at it how you want. But I think Kane should have kept the title for a little bit longer. And then around this time, there was the big story about whether Kane and Undertaker were in cahoots and secretly working with each other. And obviously, we wouldn't learn about that for quite some time. Kane and Mankind would win the tag team titles, and then they would drop it to Stone Cold and The Undertaker at Fully Loaded, and then they would win it back, and then eventually they would drop it at SummerSlam '98 to the New Age Outlaws after Kane turned on his own partner. And of course, he did eventually join forces with The Undertaker, thus forming the Brothers of Destruction, which that's all going to be talked about in another separate edition for another time for this series. But no matter what Kane was doing, he was over, he was in the mix, doing a lot of cool stuff, and he was just an incredibly strong and popular character. And throughout the next couple of months, Kane and Undertaker were unstoppable, and this was where another failure would come into it. Again, no fault of Kane's. Kane and Undertaker were booked to be Vince McMahon's puppets, and they would do his dirty work and eventually get the WWF title off Stone Cold at In Your House Breakdown. And then they broke Vince's leg the next night, which was fun. And then they eventually went at it for the vacant WWF title. And obviously, neither of them won at Judgment Day because Stone Cold attacked both of them. And of course, Undertaker and Paul Bearer would reunite, thus turning their back on Kane. And this moment where Undertaker and Paul Bearer turned on Kane, this turned Kane into a more tragic and sympathetic figure because when he first came in, nobody liked this guy. Everyone feared this guy. No one felt sorry for him. Everyone hated this guy. But over the course of time, fans started to like him. Fans warmed up to him. And once Undertaker revealed that he was the one who burned Kane's face, fans started to get behind Kane in a very big way. And he was embraced by the fans well and truly. And they felt sorry for him. And it's quite amazing because when you look at this guy, he doesn't really come across as someone you would feel sorry for. But then when you learn about what happened to him, you think, you know what, maybe Kane isn't the evil monster we're all led to believe. Maybe he's just misguided. And it worked. You know, as crazy as it sounds, it works for his character. So now the roles were reversed. Kane was the beloved babyface, and The Undertaker was the evil heel. Unbelievable. So around this time, Kane would just go on a rampage, trying to set various wrestlers on fire. He would face The Undertaker again, this time in the quarterfinals of the Deadly Games tournament at Survivor Series 98. He was unable to win, and then he would still continue to go at it with The Undertaker, and he sort of became an unlikely ally for Stone Cold, as the two of them would mix it up with Paul Bearer and The Undertaker. And around this time as well, there was this storyline they began where Kane was being hunted down and threatened to be taken back to the insane asylum, which it was all right. It was just a bit stupid. And Kane would cost The Undertaker a buried alive match at In Your House Rock Bottom and helping Stone Cold win that match, thus allowing him to advance to the 30-man Royal Rumble match for the Royal Rumble 99 pay-per-view. And shortly after In Your House Rock Bottom, Kane would unfortunately become a puppet once again, as he would reluctantly join Vince McMahon's corporation under the pretense that if Kane didn't do the boss's bidding, he would be forced to go back to the insane asylum where he would be locked up forever. So while Kane was still very much on his own and all alone, he would be manipulated and forced to do another person's evil bidding, this time the devil himself, Vince McMahon. And Kane, for his first year, did some incredible stuff. He had an amazing first year, feuding with Mankind, feuding with The Undertaker, feuding with Stone Cold, involved in some pretty big moments. And what an unbelievable first year, winning the WWF title, winning the tag team titles twice. Kane did a lot of great stuff. He had some really good matches, some fun brawls. Everything Kane did in his first year was excellent. There was no dull moments whatsoever. There was the question of Kane not holding the title for very long, but aside from that, everything else was great. What a first year. I mean, to go from being this feared monster who came out with a bang, pun intended, at Bad Blood, and to the end of the year becoming one of the most over guys in the company. It's just unbelievable. What a wild, crazy first year for Kane. Now, in terms of the success and failures of Kane's first year, a complete success without a doubt. Absolutely brilliant. Not many failures whatsoever. There were a couple of things that were a bit questionable, no fault of his, but still really good stuff. And wow, it's just an amazing ride when you look back at it. To do what he did in his first year, it's just amazing. And when you watch him, you would probably have thought Kane had been in the WWF for about 8 or 9 years because of the way he was portrayed, but he'd only been there for his first year, and look what he did. It's just an amazing first year, but the ride would be far from over as Kane would go on to have even more great years in his career, which will get covered on this series. But I would say overall, Kane's first year, a complete success. Absolutely loved it. And as I said, what an amazing ride. So that's going to be it from me. I'm going to wrap this up now. What was your thoughts on Kane's first year in the WWF? Did you enjoy it? What was your first impressions of Kane? Were you shocked? Were you impressed? What did you think of Kane's debut at In Your House Bad Blood? Do you think it was a great debut? Do you consider it to be the best debut ever? What was your favourite moments from Kane's first year? Was it when Kane defeated Stone Cold for the WWF title? Was it when he and Undertaker joined forces for the first time ever? What was your favourite match from Kane's first year? Was it Kane versus Mankind at Survivor Series 97? Kane versus Stone Cold at the King of the Ring 98? The Inferno match against The Undertaker at In Your House Unforgiven, or the first ever match against The Undertaker at WrestleMania 14, or was it Kane versus Vader at In Your House No Way Out of Texas? And what would you say about Kane's first year? A success or a failure? You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I will see all of you next time for another edition of the Wrestling Discussion Series. So until then, take care, everybody, and stay safe. And once again, as always, much appreciated. Thanks for listening.